Welcome to episode 50 of the Game Changers. I want to apologize first because my voice is really breaking up. So
It's
just letting
fine.
you know from the beginning. I was sick a little bit. Thank you so much, Dustin. I'm your host, Carla, tonight, and I have a fantastic episode lined up for you. I'm thrilled to welcome my special guest, Dustin Ludke. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that I am sure you will find enlightening. We will dive deep into some engaging discussions and explore fascinating topics. Stay tuned for an insightful and entertaining show. Before I dive into tonight's episode, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Evan, Iggy, JC, and the TSA team for their invaluable support in providing me with this platform to engage with distinguished individuals within our community. Join me as I explore the lives and stories of my guests, uncovering their personal insights, experiences in fantasy football, and much more. The Game Changers is not your ordinary podcast. It has fostered a cherished community, and I'm honored to share this journey with all of you this evening. Dustin Ludke, fantasy football analyst extraordinaire. He is a prominent figure in the fantasy football community, known for his insightful analysis and passionate approach of the game. With a deep understanding of player dynamics and team strategies, Dustin has become a trusted voice for fantasy football enthusiasts. Dustin contributes to several well respected platforms, including Dynasty Nerds and Fantrax HQ, where he shares his expertise on various formats such as Red Draft, Keeper, and Dynasty Leagues. His content his content ranges from player evaluations and weekly recommendations to in depth strategy guides, helping fantasy managers make informed decisions through the season. Dustin's passion for fantasy football is evident in his work, where he constantly provides valuable advice. He has also participated in high profile events like Scottish Bowl 14, showcasing his strategic cleverness. Beyond his analytic prowess, Dustin is celebrated for his engaging and approachable style. He has a knack for breaking down complex concepts into easily digestible insights, making him a favorite among both seasoned veterans and newcomers to the fantasy football world. In addition to his contribution to Friend Tracks, Dustin is a host at BTG Pod FF, where he shares his knowledge and engage with listeners through the provoking discussions and expert interviews. When he's not immersed in fantasy football, Dustin enjoys connecting with the community through social media and podcasts, where he continues to share his knowledge and love for the game. His dedication and eagerness have earned him a loyal following and a respected place for the fantasy football landscape. Hello, Dustin, and welcome to the show.
Carla, thank you so much. That was the nicest introduction I think I've ever had in my life.
I'm glad you like it. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And again, I'm sorry for my voice, but being a
No, it's
teacher, this is
fine.
what you get sometimes.
Yes.
So we're gonna start with your background and personal journey. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the fantasy football world and what sparked your interest?
Yeah, so I've started playing fantasy about 20 years ago. I have a family league that's still running. It's my mom, my dad, my aunts and uncles, sisters, cousins, that kind of thing. And I've been doing that. And then some friends were like, hey, we're going to do a keeper league. Would you like to join? I joined that and started playing in that and really enjoyed the strategy of keeper leagues. Then eventually a couple of us were like, hey, we're going to do a dynasty league. We started a dynasty league and that kind of snowballed. And from the keeper league, a friend of mine, Rich, said, hey, I write for Pitcher List, which is QB List is the football site, and Pitcher List is the baseball site. He's like, I write for both. He's like, I'm not going to write for QB List. They're looking for writers. I think you'd be really good at it. You should apply. So I applied, and I had written a few things for a couple other websites, just like, hey, I have this idea. Let me throw some stuff out there. I've always been a writer. Like through high school, I wrote, essays and stories and poetry and that kind of stuff. And so I submitted something. He's like, oh, this is really good. We'd love to have you on. And I did that for 3 years, and then just started to expand into other areas. So I joined in with Dynasty Pros, and I'm the content director there. And that kind of led me to Fan Tracks. And I wrote for Dynasty Nerds for a little while. And then I started doing guest spots on podcasts. And then this year I started BTG, which is Bridge the Gap podcast. So we just had episode 10 last night. So it's just a fun extra avenue. And I continue to just evolve to see what's out there. I have a consulting business where I consult with other podcast channels and creators to help them kind of grow and learn, and use some of the expertise and things that I've learned over the past 3 or 4 years to help them get better, because I want everyone to win.
That's amazing. I love that. I never knew that about you. So the first time we met at the expo.
Yes.
We wanted to do something special at the expo for the Game Changers, and we just lured you in, and I started asking you questions about fantasy football, and that was it. We connected at the expo. Tell me a little
Yeah,
bit about the expo. How many times did you go, and what was special this year for you?
this was my second year. Previously, it's always fallen on the weekend of my son's birthday, so I hadn't been able to go the previous couple years. And then last year, the dates moved up a week. So literally, I go to the expo, I come back, and then we always go camping for my son's birthday. So I literally get home Sunday or Monday, and then Wednesday we're back out the road again. So this was my second year. This year was great. The first year was really about, I knew people's names on Twitter, and I'd done some podcasting with them. But really putting faces and physical names to people was really nice to actually like see them in real life. This year to me was a lot more, it was more special for me because I was like, I want to be intentional about my time. I wanted to make sure I felt like the first year it was like I got 2 minutes with 100 people. And I was like, this year I want 5 minutes with 25 people. I'd rather just, have more dedicated time. So I reached out to some people and had like breakfast, which was super nice, with a couple people, and just like made sure I stayed up late. Like last year, I was like, oh, I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock. This year, I was like, no, I'm just going to stay up as late as I want. Like, sleep, forget about it. Like, you can sleep when I'm done. Like, I wanted to make sure I maximize my time, because I really enjoyed that my first year of, I roomed with Joe and Steve for Front Office Pros, who were two of my best friends. Met them through fantasy football. They live in Rochester, so we roomed together again. And I enjoyed being able to hang out with them. But I enjoyed this year just going down the DoubleTree bar right at 1 o'clock and just sitting outside by the fire. I enjoyed, going to the booth and just talking to people, getting to talk to like JC and Iggy a bunch. That's where on at the expo, JC was like, "Hey, go over. Carla's doing interviews." I was like, "All right, well, I'll go over. Sure, JC. Like whatever you need." And just making sure I got some time. You got to spend time talking to Scott Fish. Went to karaoke, got to hang out with people, and just kind of made myself available. So this was special because I felt like last year in analogy, like last year I connected a lot of the dots, and this year I just made those dots like stronger. I was like, okay, I know who these people are. It's I can join together. I can, okay, hey, you guys need a ride somewhere? I've got a car. Like the four of us, we'll go. Like he was like, hey, karaoke. Hey, I think you drove some people and I drove some people. It's like Carla's got a car, I got a car. We don't need to call an Uber. Let's just go. Like we'll do that way. And it was fun. Just it's a 5-10 minute drive, but getting 5-10 minutes with 2 or 3 people in the car was me, Andrew Cooper, Sal, and Scott Fish going over. It was like, yeah, it's just a great time to hang out in the car. Like you just enjoy that possibility of just hanging out and being available. So that session was really nice, just to having that extra time. Got to talk to Dr. Kevin Murphy a ton at the opening poker game, and just finding time to spend more time with people. Maybe I got to talk to less people this year, but I felt like I had better, deeper conversations with people this year.
I agree 100%. I love being at the expo. This is my third
Yeah.
year, by the way. I love being there. That's amazing. So, what are the key? I want to talk a little bit about fantasy football insights with you, because I know
Yeah.
that you're all about insights and fantasy football as well. So, what are the key differences between Red Draft, Keeper, and Dynasty leagues, and how should managers approach each format?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I prefer a keeper league. I think Dynasty is great because obviously Dynasty you get to keep the players forever. So if you draft Caleb Williams this year, you get to keep him as long as you want. keeper leagues, you can only keep 2, 3, 4 people, and usually there's a varying cost, so you can't keep them forever. Well, redraft, it's just you draft them this year and you redraft someone else next year. I like keepers because it has that element of strategy to it. I love strategy, so I love things like Baby Bowl, where it's like a one and done. So keeper leagues are my preferred format because I get to go, this guy's going to be good this year, and if I have a good enough value, I can keep him extra years, but then I can also trade him, and that value that he has as a keeper increases his trade value. So in my previous keeper league, the year Le'Veon Bell was going to sit out, Le'Veon Bell was going in the first round because he was a top running back. And I knew that there was a possibility that he was going to sit out almost all year. So I took James Conner as the backup in the 19th round. Now, in that keeper league, the next year he would go for a 16th round and then a 13th round. He'd move up 3 rounds every year. So I drafted him, and James Conner ended up being really good. And I ended up turning him into a ton of value because his keeper value was so good that people were like, "You're telling me I can get a top 10 running back in the 16th round, 13th round?" I kept him for 2 years, traded him when he could go to the 13th round. It was still great value. So that extra layer of strategy is great. So when you're looking at players, you have to kind of gauge things differently. If you're looking at redraft, it's what are they going to do this year? Age doesn't matter. It's all about opportunities and production and potential for opportunities. In keeper leagues, it's the same thing, but there is that extra layer of, can he be kept next year? And it's not necessarily what his value will be next year in terms of like what he produced, but what is his draft value? And then dynasty, it's like, what is his potential value down the road? So you might draft, a Caleb Williams is great, but like a Drake May, a JJ McCarthy this year, who should have been really good, got injured, is still a great dynasty value because he's going to come back healthy and still have Justin Jefferson throw the ball to. The Vikings are currently 3-0, as JC likes to tell us all the time.
Yes.
That's a great team for a quarterback to go to with Kevin O'Connell. KOC is a great coach for quarterbacks. So I'm buying JJ McCarthy everywhere I can right now because I can stash him on IR, because in Dynasty, I'm not looking just at this year. I have this like 3-year window I'm looking at. And then what's my strategy for those 3 years? So you're playing a little bit more of a long game, which is a lot of fun. But they each have their strengths and weaknesses, and they each have their different strategy you got to employ in them, which is what makes fantasy fun, because if you play redraft, you're going to think about things differently than in Dynasty.
Yeah. So how do you evaluate players during the off season versus in season?
I think it's similar. It's a very similar process. I'm big on pathway to opportunity and how many hurdles does a player have to get over. So when I'm looking at someone, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's take Roschon Johnson, who I met at the combine. So I've gone to the combine the past 2 years, gone to the draft the past 2 years with credentials, got to interview players, meet them, spend some extra time with them. I fell in love with Roschon Johnson as a person. I really liked him coming out of the draft. But last year was okay. They have, they were going to have David Montgomery, and he was like, okay, he might get traded, he might not. They draft him, they get rid of Montgomery, still have Khalil Herbert. It's like, okay, that's probably not great. But my process for him was, he's good at pass blocking. His pathway opportunity is just one guy. He's just got to get past Khalil Herbert. What's up, Iggy? And then this year was they signed DeAndre Swift. So it's like, where does that pushes Roschon Johnson down? So for me, it's like, how many hurdles does he get over? Now he's got to get over 2 guys. So it's all about this hurdles of pathway to opportunity. Same thing when I'm looking at receivers, like, what is their opportunity for targets and snap share? So I've traditionally have been, even though I'm a Bills fan, have been out on Dalton Kincaid, because my process for him in the draft was, he's not going to see a full snap share because he's splitting time with Dawson Knox. That scheme doesn't really favor the tight end, and he's not really playing. If he plays even the slot role that the people want him to, that scheme doesn't favor the slot wide receiver. So I just didn't see a huge pathway for him to have high upside. He was basically splitting time, and we saw that last year. He was a meh tight end until Dawson Knox got hurt. Then he had 4 good weeks of going out, and then he had another good week when Dawson Knox played halftime on his first week back, and then it was back to being meh. And we've seen it this year where it's been meh. He had a touchdown this week. Now, he's still a gifted athlete, but I don't care about draft capital. I don't care about athleticism. I don't really care about air yards and all these like metrics. I want to know what's the percentage of their pathway to getting the opportunity, and how many hurdles do they have to jump over? How many red flags are there? How many question marks are there? And the fewer there are, that's how I look for players. So a guy who has very little question marks, that's the guy that I'm going to be looking for.
So what role does a player injury history play in your evaluations?
It plays in some. So again, it's when I'm looking at pathway opportunities, it's what percentage of it will go 100% right, what percent of it will go 100% bad, and then injuries definitely play in it. So when you're talking about, let's say, a Cooper Kupp who's had a lot of injuries,
Yes.
that's a hurdle he's going to have to get over. He's going to have to get over that hurdle of injury. So even though I think Cooper Kupp, when healthy, is the best receiver in football, he wasn't drafted me because there's too many injuries there for me. So that's another hurdle that he has to get over, to having that pathway of opportunity, the pathway to success, to be 100% what he can be. Whereas I'm looking at someone like Cooper Kupp compared to like a CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Well, the pathway for them, they don't have that history of injury. So that's just another hurdle for them, and it's a bigger hurdle for some guys. I think a Cooper Kupp has a huge hurdle. Some guys like J.K. Dobbins, now he was coming off an injury, was not, super injury prone. If you guy was never like Derrick Henry has never really been injured, so I don't really small injury doesn't really factor into it. Christian McCaffrey had one bad one, had a couple good years. So it's a smaller hurdle than some of these guys that are injured every year. And I don't think injury prone is a thing, but I do think there's some people that are just fragile
You took
and
the word
frail.
out of my mouth.
There's some guys that are just
Yes.
fragile and frail. If you look at someone like Ken Walker, who I think is super talented as a running back, he's now had 5 core muscle injuries. He's had a sports hernia, he's had a growing pull, and he's had 2 abdominal pulls. Now he's dealing with an oblique. Those are all core muscles. Something
Yeah.
in there is just fragile on Ken Walker, and so I'm kind of out on him because it's too many hurdles. Like that hurdle of injury gets higher, and then you're talking about, is it a pass heavy offense versus a run heavy offense? Okay, that's another hurdle to get over. He's got Charbonnet, that's another hurdle to maybe get over. So it just adds up too much, and so I look at injuries as it's a hurdle, and every injury makes that hurdle just a little bit higher.
Yeah, I agree. I don't believe like being like in sports myself. I played sports a
Yeah,
lot. I don't believe a person can be like injury prone. I do believe maybe sometimes maybe your body is not is tired or something like that, and you
yeah,
get injured because of it. It's not
yeah,
because you are injury prone. Maybe that week they didn't sleep well, they didn't do something good, or they didn't eat well. Something might have happened that they got injured, in my opinion. This is a personal
yeah.
opinion,
And
not
that's the
any
way it is.
not a
And some
doctor
people just
opinion.
have that makeup where they recover for injuries faster.
Yeah.
Carson Wentz for me is the perfect example. Like, he's not injury prone. I think he's just a frail, fragile person where like his body just
Yeah.
doesn't recover. And so what would just be a hit for a normal guy is like a devastating hit for him. And those things add up. And essentially it's like what would just be a sprain for other guys is a major sprain for him. And what would be just a bruise for some guys, they can ice it to be fine. It's a major bruise that keeps him out. Like, it's just he
Yeah,
just his body just doesn't react well. Whether that's genetics, whether that's nutrition, whatever it is, I don't know. But there's some people that are just that way.
I agree 100%. So how has social media changed the landscape of fantasy football analysis for you, Dustin?
It's changed a lot. I will say I don't love social media. I wish I didn't have to be on it. I think it's a necessary evil for us as content creators. It's great for information sharing. And I think we're at the point now where it's almost too much information. When I first started playing, there was no like we're back in the magazine days, right? We had to buy a magazine. And I remember buying all of them on family car trips. I'm in, junior high or high school, and I'm going on family road trips, and I've got stacks of magazines, and I'm reading them, looking at the depth charts, and you just had to know. So, famous story of my family league is, I believe it was, I forget it was the other. I think it was like Willie Parker was playing, and he went down, and I knew that Rashard Mendenhall was a backup, but no one else did because you just didn't know back was back then. And I remember saying to
Mhm.
my stepdad, like, "Hey, you should pick up Rashard Mendenhall. He's the backup." He's like, "Why don't you pick him up?" I was like, "Oh, I have enough running backs. I'm good." They picked him up, and Rashard Mendenhall went on to be really good that year. But because I knew that you just didn't have the internet and the Twitter feed and this instant information. Now we have everything instantly. I don't think I heard practice reports until 2-3 years ago. That just wasn't a thing you heard. It wasn't like, oh, this guy practiced, or this guy was seen at practice, or this guy was on the side. The information is so in depth and it's so quick now that we're almost to an information overload. There's so many new stats and metrics that people are coming up with every day, which I think are great, but I think there's almost too much of it. And you're trying to like, you have all this noise swirling around you, kind of, it's almost like too hard to focus. So it's been great to getting the information out there quicker and allowing people to share information. So for me as a content creator, allowing me to let my opinion be heard and let people find in my opinion whether they agree or don't agree. I think it's great. But I think when we get to the points of like metrics and news, there's almost too much of it, and we get people who share wrong information or speculate as it's fact, and it's like, hey, that's just your thought, your educated guess, whether that's a player injury or rumors of where they might be traded or going to. We saw that a lot this summer. Social media is great. It's great for connecting with people. I mean, Joe and Steve from Front Office Pros, I wouldn't have met if it wasn't for social media. I found their podcast on Twitter, watched it on YouTube, and reached out and said, "Hey, I love your podcast. Do you guys want a guest?" And they're like, "We've never had one." I was like, "Cool, come on." And now we're best friends. This is like 3 years later. We're like best friends. I talk to Steve 2 or 3 times a week. He calls me on his lunch break. Um, it wasn't for social media, wouldn't be there. Like just being able to meet people and right, you reaching out and go, "Hey, do you want to come on Game Changers?" That wouldn't have existed 5 years ago
Yes.
for me. So it's been great. It's opened the door. I think it's now just when you open that door, if you're someone new and you're just getting onto social media, if you open that door, it's going to be this flood, and you have to figure out what do you have to filter in and out to make sure you have a good process. Otherwise, you get flooded with too much information. You just don't know. It's paralysis because of information. You just go, well, this guy's saying that he's going to play. This guy's saying he's a good start. He's a bad start. I don't know. And then you're just going, I don't know. And none of us really know. We're all
I
guessing. We make
agree.
educated guesses. We're making educated guesses based on the information we have. And I keep telling people, like, whether you like me or not, find people that you do like and whose process you enjoy and whose process you agree with and stick with that. Like, I'm process over results. Like, I may say this guy's going to be good this week because X, Y, and Z, and it might not work out because there's so many other things that factor into it. But at least I know my process was good. So they'll be like, find 5 people that you love, their process and the way they talk and the way they think and the way they evaluate players, and go with that. And I would say those 5 people should all be slightly different. You can't just find 5 people that all say the same thing. Find
The
5 people
same.
that have slightly different takes. Find a film guy. Find a strictly a film guy. Find a strictly an analytic guy. Maybe find 3 or 4 people that are in between who maybe look at some different things, and that'll give you a well-rounded view. Because people like me, I do it for fun. I enjoy looking at stuff. If you don't have time to do it, find people who do.
I agree 100%. And like you said, because of social media and because of a lot of noise coming from all over the place, people cannot concentrate on,
Yep.
what's right and what's wrong. So they need to do their work. They need to like search what's right and what's wrong and
Yeah.
find what you feel it's good.
And I will
So
say this about analysis real quick. If
yes,
you see
yes,
someone that
please.
just says this player is good and doesn't give you a reason why, A, probably don't follow that person, but B, ask them why. If you can't ask
Yes,
an analyst why, and they can't tell you the why they think something, then they're not someone you should be following. That's just lazy analysis. That's just throwing out takes for throwing out takes. If they can't give you the reasons why, and it's a valid reason why, you shouldn't be following. You shouldn't be listening to them. I'm okay with anybody saying anything they want as long as they can back it up with some sort of coherent, logical thought process. I may not agree with it, but if you can back it up with the logical process, I'm okay with that.
positive logic process.
Yep.
I do believe in that 100%. So you don't have to be like negative. You ask a question, you have an answer. You don't like it, you can go to the other person, which
Yeah.
is which is so normal. You might, like you said, you might like me. You don't like me. You can
Yeah.
go to the next person, and so on. I really like that. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing that, Dustin. When you're not analyzing fantasy football, what other hobbies or interests you have?
I have a 11-year-old son, I have a wife, so there's a lot of family stuff, playing Fortnite with my son is a big thing. So now his friends at school are like, "Will you play Fortnite with us tonight?" I'm like, "Sure, if you guys get your homework done, we can play at 7 o'clock, if I don't have something else going on." That work-life balance is super important to me in terms of, right, trying to do content, trying to do podcast writing, all that kind of stuff, which is why I didn't do a podcast for my first 3 years. I just didn't think I had time to balance everything, and I was writing a lot more than I was. I've kind of written less this year and enjoy the podcast, but I'm very strategic of like, I'm going to spend Thursday nights during the game, and that's when I'll reach out and schedule guests, and that's when I'll work on thumbnails, and that's when I'm doing these things. Like I'm watching football anyway. I have a long-standing, I guess, unspoken deal with my wife. I do all the laundry in our house, so I do it all Sunday. So Sunday is watching football, doing laundry. So I get up in the morning, put a load in, put it in the dryer before the game starts. During the a commercial break, I go get the first load, sit there on the couch, fold it on the coffee table, and keep doing loads throughout the day. It's the way I can do my part around the house, but it's like, hey, I'm gonna do football, but I'm also gonna do laundry, and it's all there. And like, I try to get a couple loads done on Saturday, so I have a bunch to fold during the first games because I'll watch football all day Sunday. Now, if my wife needs me, if something's happening, I get up and help her. But she knows
Of
that
course.
part of it is me doing this is like I'm gonna do it. So when I'm not watching football, it's a lot of just hanging out, relaxing. I don't watch a ton of football podcasts, to be honest with you. I watch a lot of other podcasts, especially at work. I have a second monitor that always have podcasts, so I'm always doing listening to podcasts of growth and development stuff. So I'll listen to people who talk about YouTube growth, or listen to people that talk about personal growth, or listening to music. Love
Yes,
doing that at work. And then if I'm my other free time, I'm a people person, so anything with people is fun.
me too.
I'm in the fantasy space. Most people are extroverts, or introverts. I found. I think me and you,
Yes,
Carla, are the few extroverts in the group. So
yes.
I love doing things with people. So if the neighbor's like, "Hey, do you want to come down?" and I'm like, "Yep." You don't even like, "Do you want to come down?" and I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there." Like, don't even tell me what, I'll be there. Like, I don't care. I love doing things with people. I love games. I love puzzles. So a bunch of the guys in the neighborhood are talking about doing an escape room together, like all the dads in our street. Stuff like that is fun. I love being outdoors. I used to be a big water sport guy, so canoeing, whitewater rafting, love that kind of stuff. But anything with people for me is just energizing. So that's why the expo was great, because I stayed up for
Yes.
24 hours the one day. I got up super early, drove in, stayed up for 24 hours, and was like, I'm not tired. Like, this is what gives me energy. It's what fuels me. Where some people, my wife is that way. People just drain her. She's gonna come back from being with her family. She's just gonna be drained for days. We have
Really?
like a dinner party. If we have like a dinner party with like three other couples, she's like, I'm just drained for like 4 days. I'm like, I want more people. Like, bring them all. It's just the way I'm wired. I love being around
Yeah.
people. I love interacting with people. So if I'm not watching film or watching a game, give me something with people. That's what I love. That's why one of the things I like about social media is that kind of interactions with people, and I can talk to people, message them, and get into healthy discourse with people. And then, right, getting on a phone call or a video with someone is also fun. You popped in the show yesterday. I did the fantasy football show with uh, Johnny and Nick for an hour and 45 minutes. And they came on my podcast, Bridge the Gap, for an hour. It was like 3 hours of podcasting, and we got done at 10:15 my time, and I was like, I'm wide awake. Like, I know I got to go to bed, but this was awesome. I could spend 3 hours talking football with two guys that I absolutely enjoy being with. So I just love that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. And for you to help your wife while you're watching football, that's really awesome too. I mean, a guy that's helping his wife, that's like,
The support
thank you
system that we,
thank you
as
for
content creators,
supporting your wife.
you
That's
have to have a
really,
support system. You have to have a wife
yes,
and a family that's willing to support you. When,
yes.
like, a Thursday, I do my podcast Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock. My son's in bed, but it's like, hey, 8:45, 8:30, I'm going down, getting set up, getting ready. I'm gonna be out for the next hour and a half. And she's okay with that. It's like, I need you to support me. And she's supporting me. Like, she's super helpful. Like, she's always sharing my content out with her friends who don't know anything about football. Like, she'll share it on her Facebook page.
That's
If
amazing.
I'm on things, and she's super. She has my business card in her wallet, and she's always like, people will mention football. She's like, my husband does football. I know nothing. Here you go.
Oh, Mel.
I she would do that no matter what, but like, I can't just shirk off my responsibilities as a husband and a part of the family. Like, at the end of the day, we're a team as a family, and I need to do my part.
That's what makes you a great partner. That's what makes you a
Yeah,
great partner. And
yeah.
thank you for
So
sharing that. It's
any
amazing.
man watching, laundry is the key to football. Like, tell your wife you'll do all the laundry and fold it while you watch football, and it's super easy.
Yes, Doug. So I'm gonna ask you a couple like rapid questions. What's your
Okay.
favorite NFL team?
Favorite, Buffalo Bills. I'm a Bills fan through and through.
What's your favorite fantasy football format?
Keeper league, half PPR. Usually we're the keepers. You keep three keepers a year. They go up 2 or 3 rounds per draft. Yeah, Doug. Do
What's
laundry on Sundays.
What's your best fantasy football advice you've ever received?
Uh, find the joy in not winning. It's something I preach to people. Just winning is fun, but find a way of having fun when you're not winning.
Nice. One player you think is underrated this season?
It's been Tony Pollard all year. It's been off season. People were too hyped on Tajay Spears. This was always going to be Tony Pollard's backfield, and it's turned out that way. And I think he's still criminally undervalued.
One player you think is overrated this season?
It's Dalton Kincaid. He's always been overrated. People were piping up draft capital and athleticism. At the end of the day, athleticism doesn't mean squat in the NFL. They're all athletic. It's about scheme and fit and coaching. So the scheme didn't fit Dalton Kincaid. He's been overvalued for a long time.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So let's talk a little bit about you being the content director. What goes into creating compelling content for fantasy football fans, and how do you keep it fresh and engaging?
Yeah, content director. So I've been content director for Dynasty Pros now for 2 years. I was looking for other opportunities, talked to one of the guys who does stuff over there, did a podcast, talked to Bob Miller, who's the owner, and was like, hey, I'm looking for someone to help run the site. Part of it is just allowing the writers to be authentically them, and not forcing your writers to write. We never force anybody to write anything. We may say, hey, we would love to get 2 articles a month from you. And some people can do more, some people can do less, but I want them to have passion in their writing, and
Yeah.
keeping it fresh. So if they're passionate about it, there's probably someone else that's passionate about it out there. I can say, hey, we should write an article on Dalton Kincaid being overrated, but if they're not passionate about it, it's going to come through right, and it's just not going to come off great. I want people that are passionate. I want you to write about what you're passionate about, or do whatever content, whether that's video content, shorts, writing, whatever it is. I want you to be passionate about it. So that's how you really create content that people like, because it's authentic, that someone is passionate about. If I told you, Carla, to write about ballet, which you may not, you do Zumba, which is like dancing-ish, right? But if I said ballet and you're not super passionate about ballet, like, yes, you could write about it because you understand the basics of ballet. But if you're not passionate about ballet, that's going to come across, and it's just going to be an assignment, not a passion. I want this to be a passion for people.
I used to be a ballerina.
Well, whatever dance form you don't do, I'm just trying to throw some
But
examples out
I got your point. I agree
there.
100% with you. I agree 100% with you. Yeah. So, what are some current trends in Dynasty Fantasy Football that managers should be aware of, in your
A
opinion?
trend that I think is undervalued right now is backup quarterbacks. I'm talking about a Spencer Rattler and a Jordan Travis. I think everyone was hyped up on the Jaden Daniels, the Caleb Williams,
Yes.
the Drake Mays, the JD McCarthy, but JD McCarthy's hurt. You want Spencer Rattler, who's the backup for Derek Carr in New Orleans, and Jordan Travis, who's a backup for Aaron Rodgers in New York for the Jets. There's potential for them in Dynasty next year because Derek Carr, yes, he's played really well this year, but this last week has been typical Derek Carr. He's never been super great. Aaron Rodgers is 40 something years old. Like, who knows what's going to happen to him? Like, they could have legitimate shots to starting next year. And if you can pick them up now for pennies on the dollar, you pick them up for next to nothing. Yeah, JC knows Spencer Rattler's. I mean, you're talking about Spencer Rattler that a couple years ago was talked about being the number 1 overall pick, but stayed in college. You're talking about Jordan Travis, who the NCAA committee said, hey, Florida, you guys are undefeated, but don't get a shot at the national championship because you lost Jordan Travis. So theoretically, had you had Jordan Travis, you would have had a shot at the national championship. Those are 2 high talented guys who didn't get the draft capital, but everybody's, well, they didn't get drafted high. Well, who cares? They're going to have opportunities, and they're going to be on, I don't think great teams, but they're going to be good teams. Like, if he takes over for Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Travis, he still has Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. If you're talking Spencer Rattler takes over for Derek Carr, you still have Chris Olave, Raheem Shaheed, Alvin Kamara for another year. So there's guys like that you can pick up cheap. And that's where we talk about all these like backup running backs, the Braylon Allens and the Audric Estemes, and pick this guy up, he might start soon. Yeah, that's true. But the value in quarterbacks is there, especially in super flex leagues where you can start 2. But even in regular leagues, like getting a guy for a 5th, 4th round pick right now, or you can pick off waivers and throw on your taxi squad if you could now. And taxi squad, if you lock, but you can throw on the end of your bench or pick them up late in the season and just ride out and see what happens. It's like getting even if they're just okay, an okay quarterback in Dynasty goes for a 2nd rounder. If you have a Daniel Jones right now and you trade him, you can trade Daniel Jones for a 2nd rounder. You tell me I can find a 2nd rounder on my waiver? If I can find a 2nd round pick off your waiver, you're picking those up all day. We should be doing that with backup quarterbacks. It's a trend that I think people are slowly catching on to, but not quite yet.
Thank you. What tips would you give to someone who is just starting out in Dynasty Fantasy Football?
Hold your picks. I think the thought process in Dynasty is like, oh, I'll just trade my future picks to get better this year, especially in your startup draft. Those startup picks are worth a ton. Save your picks and see how it goes. I think a lot of people just trade their next year picks, so they're like, I'll be good this year. I'll win this year and I'll figure it out down the road. The problem is that you trade too much and you just have nothing left. And then if you're bad, the problem is if you trade your picks and you're bad, then you're just bad forever because you never have any picks and you're on this credit card system of always using next year's pick to try to be good, and you just never, and eventually it will catch up to you, or the league folds because of that, or you drop out because of that. Save your picks if you're starting a dynasty. Don't trade away next year's picks. Actually, you probably should be acquiring next year's picks to see how you draft, to see how you evaluate rookies, and give yourself a year or 2 before you start making those big trades.
How important is community engagement for Dynasty Pros in fantasy football? And what strategies do you use to build and maintain a strong community, Dustin?
I mean, building community is huge for everything. Uh, there's a concept in the world of the third place. So home is your first place, work is your second place. What's your third place? For some people, it's churches. For some people, it's bars. Social media
Yeah.
has become the third place for a lot of people. And,
Yes.
and I think there's a chance for community. So that's why people have discords. That's why people have these, spaces. They have chats. That's why live chat on YouTube is a thing, because we want to build community. We want to be able to interact with people. So part of that is being consistent. If you are trying to build a social media following, you have to consistently post, but not just post. You have to comment on not only your post but other people's posts. So I have a own personal rule where I try to post once a day and I try to comment on 5 other posts a day. Just make sure I'm out there in the community, because I think the biggest thing people try to do on social media is just be a celebrity, where it's like, well, if people come to me, I'll talk to them. No, like, you need to actively go out there and talk to other people. Like, in the day, I'm not smarter than anybody else. I'm not bigger than anybody else. I'm just a person. The only difference between me and Joe Schmo, who has 2 Twitter followers, is I've put more time and energy in it. The only difference between me and a Matthew Berry is time into it. So because Matthew Berry has a bigger platform and has put more time into it, he's going to have a bigger following. Doesn't make Matthew Berry
Thank you
smarter
for
than me,
saying that, Dustin.
right? It doesn't make him smarter than me. It just means he has more time because he does it full time and he's done it longer. And we talk about people. Oh, I wish I would have done it when I was 16, like a Hutch or Luke Solid, which I think it's great they're into it early. But like at the end of the day, if you've been in for 2 years, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, you got to be consistent. So you got to get out there. You got to be consistently posting your own stuff, but also commenting other people's stuff. That's how you get seen. If you're small and you come on my post and comment, I'm not gonna like shut you down. I'm hope people comment on your comment. Like, post an engaging comment. Like, and I think there has to be you have to add to the conversation. You can't just throw out things that just said, like,
Yes.
you can't just go, oh, this guy's great. Like, give me the why, but also go in people's comments like, well, this is what I think. What do you think about this? And post some engaging and add to the conversation. You have to take that conversation one step further. I think people just throw out stuff and it ends the conversation. Like, don't do that. Add something that continues the conversation, takes it to the next step, add some more conversation, some
Be
questions,
knowledgeable.
some thoughts, like, and thought provoking. Now, don't do the engagement farming of like, here's some fries, ketchup isn't available. Like, that's just engagement farming. But let's say someone goes, if someone says, who's a player I should pick up right now? Go, hey, I think you should pick up Spencer Rattler because X, Y, and Z. How long do you think Derek Carr's going to be a starter for? And then someone goes, well, I think he's a starter for this year, next year. And I go, cool. Well, his contract says this, that, and then you can just have that back and forth and build.
Back and forth
If you just
conversation.
throw something out there that ends the conversation, you're not doing it right.
I agree 100%. And I see a lot of people that they just want to go to places that they have a lot of followers, which I don't agree with. So that's part of Twitter, like, which is really bad, but it is what it is. And I hear you with that. And people just say hi and they don't continue the conversation, which is really, it's not knowledgeable as well. So you need to continue the
Yep.
conversation and you need to add into it.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree with that. So, what inspired you to start the BTG pod? And what have been some of the most memorable moments on the show?
Yeah, I started it because I wanted to just continue the conversation. So 2 years
Yeah,
ago, I was writing and I said, hey, I probably should add podcasts to my resume. I've been trying to get a full-time job in the space and realized that
that's
podcasting
number
was a way to do it.
10, right?
Yeah, so I've had 10 episodes. So I said, so two
Yes.
years ago, so I do birthday goals. My birthday's in October, and instead of New Year's resolutions, I do birthday resolutions. And so 2 years ago, my birthday resolution was
Yeah.
was to do 52 podcast guest appearances in a year. It was like, all right, it's like one a week, whatever, I'll do that. And I started reaching out. Actually, my goal was 26. It was one every other week. And I just started reaching out to people like out of the blue, like, hey, do you need a guest? And the people like, and the overwhelming. I did like almost 100 podcasts in the first year, and I love it. I love getting on video and talking to people, but I didn't want to just do another podcast. I didn't want to just do another, waiver wire and sit starts and QB rankings. I wanted to do something different. And part of it was the time. So I decided to talk to my wife, and she said, yeah, if you're going to do it, do it. Like, this is what I think. I said, this is what I want to do. So Bridge the Gap, BTG, is kind of like this. It's a conversation podcast, and we take a topic each week. So yesterday we talked about when to give up on a player. Like, what does that look like? How do you decide that? We kind of talk about that as a whole, all these more broader topics, and we kind of bring them back to fantasy football. So we've done those. I think for the most memorable moment was my first one. I made sure that I got Joe and Steve on, who I've said are my two best friends. I called them. I was like, hey, you guys are on the first one. Like, it's not negotiable. You're coming on. Like, this is when it's going to be. You're on. They're like, okay, done. And just seeing that full circle, because I was their first guest on their podcast. They had done podcasts, but I was their first guest they had on it. They were probably a couple, 20 episodes in. And for them to be my first guest was really like just special to have them on. Had a great time talking salary cap leagues and just kind of having that full circle moment with them and I've done 10, 15 videos with them. So they really gave me a ton of reps in terms of like
Wow.
experience. Just over the years, it's like, hey, do you want to do this podcast? I was like, yeah, we should probably make it 3. And they're like, okay, we'll do 3 podcasts. Like, okay, let's record. And just, Steve would call me up. It's like, hey, can you do a video tonight on this? I'm like, yeah, just give me, shoot me the link. So being able to like, I don't know, have that full circle moment of them being my first guest on Bridge the Gap was really just special because I was their first guest, and just the relationship we formed through fantasy football, was just amazing. The first time we met was at the expo last year.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to be able to like have that full circle moment on episode 1 was super cool.
Nice. So, how do you decide on topics and guests for your podcast and episodes?
So part of my consulting business, one thing I tell new creators is you should have a whole year's worth of content planned out. So I decided I was going to do a podcast, gave myself a month before I actually started it. And I literally have a document that has a whole year's worth of content of ideas, thoughts, topics. And when you talk about YouTube in general, if you talk to like someone like a Mr. Beast or some of those big YouTube creators outside of the football space, they'll say, have 100 topics and every day come up with 3 new ones. And it could just be a kernel of a thought. So I have a whole list. And then what I did was I made my list of topics. So I have 60 topics, which is a little over a year if you do 1 a week. And then I just made a list of guests. And I was like, okay, these are the people I know I can get. Like, these are the people that I'm friendly enough where I was like, if I reach out, they'll say yes, right? So it's like Joe and Steve. I know, like Andrew Cooper, like these people. I was like, all right, these are the people I know will say yes. These are the people that I think might say yes. Some of the big names like a Jiv Coventry, who I've been on his show a bunch of times, who's a great guy. Some of these other, big names, Eric Moody, those
Awesome.
type of people. And then I made a list of like, these are my dream guests. The fantasy footballers, AD, Mike, and Jason, Matthew Berry, Matt Harmon, those sort of guys. Like, those are my dream guests. And then I do mine a little differently. So when I think about a show, I think about a guest. So I'm having Dr. Kevin Murphy on next week. What do I want?
Awesome.
What do I think Dr. Kevin would be the best to talk about? And I thought about it. It was like, he won Commissioner of the Year. He's all about making fantasy fun. So that's what we're going to talk about. It was like, if I'm going to have Dr. Kevin on, he's the best at talking about making fantasy fun. So that's what we're going to talk about. If I'm going to have Joe and Steve on, their specialty is salary cap leagues. So that's what we're going to talk about. If I'm going to have Bob Miller who's the owner of Dynasty Pros, he's an IDP guy. So we're going to talk IDP. So really developing the show not around the topic, but more around a guest and what topic it fits them. So that's what was kind of fun. Like, I know I want to have this person on to do that. So I see Dr. Barry's on here saying that, yeah, if he wants to come on,
Yes,
yeah,
he wants to come
Dr.
and
Barry, like I would have you come on and talk about injuries. Like, how do we evaluate injuries? Like, that's your specialty. That's your area of expertise. I want you to come on and talk about that. I don't want to bring
I
someone on and
have Dr.
go,
Jesse come in on the show at some point too on my
yeah. So
show.
like, I don't want to bring Dr. Barry on and say, hey, let's talk
Yes,
about tight ends if that's not your specialty. I want you to come on and talk about your specialty. And so that's
yes,
how I've been
I
kind of
agree.
developing that. So I literally have a list of 60 to 70 different topics. Some of them are more fleshed out. And then I have a list of probably, and the guest list, when I started making it, the people I was like, I know I can get was like 60 long. And then like the people I thought I could get was another like 30 people. I'm like, man, I have 100 people. That's 2 years worth of guests.
That's
So it's just like,
awesome.
man, I can find a ton of people. And that's what's been great about
Yes,
this community is I've been able to connect and go, hey, I know I can call this person and they'll come on. And so it's been great. No one has said no so far, which has been great. It's been 7 episodes and I've got 13 or 14 books and no one has said no. So
I'm booked through December. I'm open. I'm
yeah,
asking for January right now. I'm booked through December. So I totally agree with you. Like the community, there's not for me, there's no big name or like small name. We are like
yep,
they are all the same for me. I just
yep,
knock that door and they tell me yes or no. And
yep.
nobody, like you said, nobody
No one
says
has said
no.
no. Yep,
Nobody says no because they love you, they respect you, and they want to be on the show. And they
yep,
want to, like promote you as an
yeah.
individual for the community, which I love in our community. That's really important. So my next question for you: how important is listener feedback and community engagement for your podcast, and how do you foster it?
So that's a big part of the podcast is because we're having conversation on topics. I want that conversation to continue outside of the pod. So I try to
Yes.
post a pinned comment on our YouTube, try to engage people that way. Now it's just me, so it's time gets it's not as easy for me to hop on that social media and my own and try to do things, but I try to just keep that conversation going once the pod ends. So I love it if people engage. So we had someone hop on last night who asked a completely different question. They were like, "Hey, what should I do with this trade?" I'm like, "Or who should I start?" I'm like, throw it up there, man. We'll answer it. It's just I want to engage with the community and build that community. Now we're 10 episodes in. It's been slow going, as you know. Like it's hard to build a community from scratch. But I'm hoping that we can bridge the gap as a place for developing conversations around topics, not just players. Right. So it's not like if they ask who should I start in week 4, once Sunday happens, that question is done. There's no that conversation ends. I want to have a conversation about topics that can continue for weeks and weeks and weeks, and people can revisit down the road and go. So if I talk to Dr. Kevin about making fantasy fun, I'm hoping that next August people revisit that podcast because they're looking at ways of making their podcast fun next year, and they continue that conversation next year. So it should be this evergreen content of like discussing these topics. So it's I'm always on there. If someone posts a comment, I make sure I always comment back. I try to post like an open-ended question on there of just like, hey, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? When do you give up on a player or whatever it is, whatever the topic is that week, to build that community. So you just have to be active and be on there and provide a forum and a place for them to carry on that conversation.
I love that. That's mutual respect. This is what I
Yep.
teach at school too. That's mutual respect. So, any future for the pod? What can a listener look forward to for your
Yeah, you can look
podcast?
forward to like I said, we got Dr. Kevin on next week to talk making fantasy fun. I've got a new sub series we're going to be starting in a couple weeks called Bridge the Gap Innovators. While we're bringing on people who have new or innovative ways of playing fantasy football. So Will from Fantasy Spins coming on, and we're going to talk about his app and kind of what it is and how it's different and what it's innovating. So it's going to be like every 8 to 10 weeks we'll do one of those. We'll bring on someone like a Drafters or a Locker or whoever it is that has a different way, a different spin on fantasy football, the way you can play, and allow them to have a platform to talk that and kind of talk about why they innovated and what the innovation is and why it's different and why it's exciting for people. So that'll be coming out. You'll see a couple of those, and we're just going to talk all kinds of topics. We're going to talk time management. How do you manage multiple leagues? Because the casual player has 1 or 2 leagues. I have 7, and that's a lot for me, but there's people out there who have 20, 30, like they have a ton of leagues. So how do you manage that time? As a content creator, how do you manage your time? So we're going to talk time management as a general concept, but as a general concept, then we'll also focus into fantasy football. Like how do you manage your waivers? If you have multiple leagues, how do you functionally do that? What tips and tricks do you use as someone who has 20 leagues? What's tips and tricks they have for doing that? We're going to have a discussion about admitting you're wrong. Like it's okay to admit you're wrong. And how do we do that on our player takes so we're not locked into place? How do we do that in general in life? And then how do we do it in fantasy football? We're going to do one on wrestling and football. Why is there such a huge crossover between people who like football and like fantasy football who also like, professional wrestling? What is it about those two things that people enjoy? What's the commonality there? And maybe people who like wrestling will start liking football more. Maybe people who like football who never really thought about wrestling might go, oh, maybe give this a shot. Maybe it's a way of broadening their horizons. And we'll have all kinds of topics in between. We'll talk about players. We'll talk about trades, how to make trades. What's the best way to engage your league in trades? We'll talk about some of those sort of things. And any topic that you can think of that would be a life application will also show up in Bridge the Gap at some point.
That's amazing. We will talk more about your podcast and how and what time and everything, what day, what time at the end when where they can find it as well. I want to ask a question about the FSWA. What does being a member of the FSWA mean to you, and and how was it impacted, and how did it impact your career?
Yeah, I think it was important for me to join because I think it legitimizes what I do. Because I think a lot of people just, especially like, friends and family, like, oh, this is like a side job for you. I'm like, yeah, it is a side passion, but there is some legitimacy to it. So Andy Behrens is the president. He does a great job with it. There
I
are
love
some
it.
resources out there with it where it's just like they help you kind of get some things. They do awards. It's really helped me kind of push me as a writer on some level because I
Yes.
can write whatever I want. Like I can write an article in an hour and put it out, and it'll be okay. But if I'm saying I'm an FSW, like I'm saying I'm on the same group as these other titans of the industry, I need to step my game because I can't throw out a 6 out of 10 when they're putting out 8s and 9s out of 10s, right? Like they're putting out bangers every week, and I'm putting out crap every week. So it helped me step my game up. And it just was nice to be like recognized to be part of that. And I've reached out to Andy to like help him grow that because I think there's definitely some areas where that can grow and be more of a resource for people in the industry. So I think it was fun to join. It's a lot of people just don't know that it's there, that there are industry, groups that are out there for people who write and do content.
That's amazing. I never heard about the FSWA before, like Doug did when he had something going, like he posted something in, and he was part of it. So I heard about it last year,
Yeah.
and he was a finalist, a writer and a finalist for it.
Yep.
So this is something amazing that like people like you as writers, just that
Yeah.
finalist. I said that. So people like you, like Doug, like a lot of people that they can put like great content, they can be recognized with
Yeah.
the FSWA, and Andy is doing a great job, being part of it as well.
I think
That's
that's the big
really
part is
rewarding.
the recognition is huge because I put articles out and I don't know if anybody's reading them. I throw it out that I'm like, does anybody read this? I don't know. One of the biggest highlights of my career was maybe 2 years ago. I was doing an article every month, and Nate Povlitz put it out on like his article. He was doing an article of like the best things I saw this week, and he mentioned my article, and I was like,
That's awesome.
not only did he read it, but he thought it was one of the best things he read that week, and like it just was like a huge validation thing of like, oh man, someone's
It is.
reading my stuff, but also someone thinks it's good enough. And right, Doug, being a finalist for FSWA awards is huge because they get hundreds of nominations for each category, and they've narrowed it down to
Yeah.
5. And so like I'm not you. Obviously, most people self-nominate, which is great. But like I nominated myself, and I looked at myself, and it's like, oh man, this is just not good enough. Like, and it pushed me to like, okay, I need to be better. If I want to be in consideration for is let me step my game up and let me really take some more time and self-edit and really think about the type of articles I'm writing and the way I write.
There's a lot of great writers out there, and
Yeah.
you guys are one of the best. Like, you are one of the best, and Doug is one of the best, and there's
Yep.
many like you, which is really awesome. Can you share your experience and participation in the Scott Bowl 14, and what was the atmosphere like?
Yeah. So this year I did the live draft in Madison, Wisconsin, where I live here. It was a lot of fun. It was our first year getting a live draft here. Um, I will say this: I went down to Chicago live draft last year, just to hang out. Hoove was like, "Hey, you should come down." And Wendy early was like, "Yeah, you should come down." I'm like, "Okay, I'll come down." Um, and I didn't like I knew a couple people there. I knew John McGlynn was going to be there. I knew JT was going to be there. Who I kind of knew. I'd never actually met Hoove before, but I was like, okay, I want to meet Hoove. I'd never met Wendy Early, and I went down there and got to meet Nick Script and those people and Steven
Yes.
Johnson. It was great just to hang out. And this year, drafting live in person was just I missed it. Like again, as an extrovert, I love being in a room. We had 2 leagues. It was a lot of fun. Jake Trowbridge and Matt Record were the hosts. They did a great job hosting it. And I'd met Jake and Dustin from DTFF podcast. We actually drove last year to the expo together. They live in Madison, so it's great to like see people, and you just don't realize how many people are in your area that do fantasy. And to see that many people in Madison, to see 30, 40 people all together just hanging out doing fantasy was like, oh man, this is bigger than just me. Like really is a third place. This really is a place where I have a community that is a lot like me that I can be, and you just don't know. And I tell anybody, like, if you're anywhere within a couple hours of a live draft, go and hang out. And so I actually went down again this year to Chicago. I wasn't gonna go, and then my schedule freed up and I went down to Chicago, and I just go down and hang out and help Steven run it. Like Steven doesn't like I just show him like, hey, what do you need? He's like, I'm like, I'll do this. He's like, okay. And it's just great to like see people and get to meet people again. And like Andy Behrens was there again. He remembered me, and I was like, oh, you're Andy Behrens, and you remember me. And last year Chicago live draft was probably the best thing I've ever done for my my career. I got to talk to Jim Coventry, and Jim Coventry was super great. We had talked. It was him, Wendy, and
Wow.
Andy Behrens, and I came over and joined in. And I was getting ready to leave, and Jim was like, "Hold on, I want to talk to you for 10 minutes." And we sat down. He's like, "Let's make sure we follow each other on Twitter." And I was like, "I definitely follow you. You're Jim freaking Coventry." He was like, "Oh yeah, I follow you too." And I was like, "You do?" And like now I've been on Jim's show a couple times, and Jim's great, and I can text him whenever I want. And honestly, I was leaving, and Nick Script from Fantrax came up to me. He went out of his way. Like I was leaving, I said goodbye already, and I was leaving. He goes, "Hey, hold up!" And he goes, "I just want to tell you that I see what you're doing, and keep it up. You're doing a great job." And that meant the world to me to be able to like have
Amazing.
someone come up to you and go, "I recognize what you're doing. I see it, and you're doing a good job. Keep it going." Because I don't think we hear that enough, and that's something I try to emulate in my life. Is like if I see someone doing a good job, just like, "Hey, you're doing a good job. Keep it up, man. Like, I see what you're doing. Keep it up." Because that really meant a lot. Like that really gave me an extra fire to go. And it was just like, man, that really fueled me for the next like year. And
I
right now I'm
agree.
writing for Fantrax with Nick, and it's great. And going to Scott Fishbowl live drafts, going to those events, the expos where you can get around your people who are just fantasy football people.
I agree
So
100%. Jim Coventry is a really good friend of Doug and I. We love him so much. So I agree with you. They are like great people. So
Sniper Mel,
SFB,
Sniper Mel, if you're ever driving through Madison, you want to grab dinner or something, shoot me a text, shoot me a message on Twitter. I'd love to just hang out and grab a meal or something.
Snappy Mel is coming to the show too. She's
There you go.
amazing. Yeah. So SFB 14 is known for its unique scoring system. How did you adapt your player evaluations and draft strategy to fit this format?
So the big format this year, the big scoring change was the kick return rules. We obviously have the new kickoffs in the NFL, and everybody was speculating what it would look like. So I did a little diving into it beforehand and kind of said, "Hey, this is what it's like in the XFL. This is what we've seen, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of what you can
Yeah.
predict." And I kind of said beforehand, like, you can predict probably 2 returns per player for an extra 20, 30 yards a game. So you're talking 5 extra points a person. And so what I did, I said, "Listen, if you think this person will be the kick returner," which at that point when we were drafting Scott Fishbowl, you didn't know. We knew like Shaheed was probably going to do it. You knew a couple other guys. My strategy was I'm going to move them up a round or a round and a half. That's it. I'm not going to jump them up like Rashid Shaheed. They're like, "Oh, we're going to take him in the 4th round." It's like, no, he's a 10th rounder. I'll maybe take him in the 8th. And then late rounds, I took some guys. Like I took the guys that I know were going to be good. Xavier Gibson, Kavante Turpin. And then I've done a lot of tracking this over the first 3 weeks. And well, the first 2 weeks, I didn't look this week. The second week, there wasn't kick returns. Like the rules have not made it to where kick returns. I think what we've realized now is that the guys who do kick returns and punt returns are the key guys to have, which I kind of knew going into it. So if you have a guy who does kick and punt returns, that's the guy who's going to have value because no matter what, he's going to probably get a chance to touch the ball. Now we've seen a lot of fair catches and touchbacks on the kickoff, so there hasn't been a ton of points. The first week there was a ton, and then everyone changed. The first week we had, I would say, maybe 8 teams that were allowing kickoffs, and we had another like 6 or 7 that were half and half. And then this past second week there was like 1 team that was allowing kickoffs, and the rest were all like not giving kickoffs at all. So it was just I stopped tracking because it wasn't worth it because no one's allowing for kickoffs. So it really just I think people overdrafted them and overstarted them after the week 1. Like week 1, no one knew, and then Raheem Blackshear puts up 40 points, and like I have to start them all week 2, and then week 2 they didn't. And now they're like, okay, we're just going back to regular fantasy football. So it allowed for a little bit of adjustment. Some people got
Yes.
a little bit of bump in value. Raheem Shaheed, if he gets some work, gets extra bonuses. But what you want with that is you want a guy that's somewhat involved in the offense, but also does kick and punt returns, like Xavier Gibson for the Jets. He does kick and punt returns, and then maybe gets 2 catches a game. So instead of having 2 points, he might have 7.
So the Scottish Bowl is also known for its charitable aspect. How important in is this community and charity focus to you?
I think it's huge, and I think what we saw from Scott Fishbowl, we've seen a lot of other charity tournaments pop up, which I think is great.
Yes.
I love
I
what Fantasy Cares does in terms of like right toys for tots, but they also do things for teachers. They do other things. They do all this great outreach and resources for people, and it's allowed other people to go, hey, I can have a charity tournament. I can Baby Bowl, Warrior Bowl, Super League, like all these other ones have popped up now. I'll say this about charity. I think it's super important, but I think what often gets lost is people think charity is just money, and you have to donate money. You have to donate money. You have to donate money. It's
It's
not just
not.
donating money, it's also donating, like, time and your talents, and I think Scott Fishbowl, they always talk about on their live streams, like, "Hey, we're looking for volunteers. If you have a skill, we'll take it." I go to the Scott Fishbowl live drafts to help out Steven because that's how I can contribute. I can't contribute financially a ton, but I can contribute my time and I contribute my talents. Like, I have a great sense of organization and getting things done, and I have
Yeah,
time. So if I can donate my time, that's just as valuable as donating money at the end of the day.
I agree.
Liking a tweet, sharing a tweet, retweeting a tweet, that's just as the same as you donating money. It always helps. Like that gets it out there. If I have 7,500 people that follow me and one extra person sees the tweet from Fantasy Cares because I retweeted it, that's the same as me donating whatever that person. If that person donates $10, it's like me donating $10 because they wouldn't have seen it without me.
100%.
So when we talk about charity, it's not just donating money. Yes, that is super important. If you can donate money, every little bit helps, but it is also donating your time, donating your talents, and whatever else you have. So if you have a skill, if you are super organized or love planning events or whatever it is, clerical stuff, you're like, I love sorting spreadsheets or I love sending emails, reach out to
Yes.
Fantasy Cares because they could use the help, and that's just as important as donating money.
Yeah. I'm that person that love charities and do a lot of charity events. And I was the one who helped in Boston. And that was the
Yep.
first time. By the way, yeah, Scott, who he reached out to me to help out this year, and I was so honored and happy to
Yep.
help him out. It was really an amazing, amazing journey for me.
Yep.
So I was really happy to help out this year in Boston, and I would do it anytime. I would do it anytime for
Yeah.
him.
Anytime.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your writer. You're a writer as well. So we were talking a little bit about being a writer, but I want to talk about fan tracks.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit before we end our journey together tonight about your journey with fan tracks?
Yeah, so like I said, I met Nick Script, who's the head of the football content over in Fantrax, last year at the Chicago Live Draft. I know John McGlynn through working for Dynasty Pros. I've been a huge fan of Nick's and his talent, and he was looking for writers for Fantrax. He put this something on Twitter like, "Hey, we're looking for writers," and as the
Yeah.
content director for Dynasty Pros, we're always looking for writers as well. And I love writing. I love that creative outlet. And so I just texted him and was like, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And he's like, "I need someone who can do this." And he goes, "I didn't reach out to you because I thought you were too busy." And I go, "Well, let's talk about what you're looking for and what I can do, right?" And it's a little more pay than what I'm getting elsewhere. So I was like, "Hey, what do you need?" So I currently do the weekly, they come out on Tuesdays, tight end streamers and sleepers and wide receivers, streamers and sleepers. I do those two articles, and I have the ability to write other articles as well. So it's just a fun little outlet. Obviously for me, it's a way of expanding my reach. So it's a bigger company than Dynasty Pros, and working with Nick and the team over there. He's got a great team of people, Colin McCamey and Doug. We got Doug, who's our editor, who does a great job, who I need an editor. I type way too fast and my spelling sucks. And Grammarly only picks up some of it. And I don't know where a comma goes. I just keep throwing commas in there. So it's great just being able to have that avenue of like, here's just another experience. I try to look at these things as I'm going to write for you for a year, and then we'll see what happens next year and see what other opportunities might arise. Because I do think there's a wealth of experience I can get from working with those guys. But I think, I'd love to do this full time. My goal is to eventually be a full time analyst somewhere, writing,
Yeah.
doing podcasts, doing on the back end. But so I'm gonna keep meeting with people and learning and going places where I can learn. If I'm with Fantrax for a year or two, who knows? But I'm gonna soak up all the information I can and learn from those guys and make the connections and again stretch myself as a writer. So it's been a lot of fun this season so far writing for Fantrax. It's a tighter schedule because they got to be out Tuesday morning, so I got to have them in Monday nights. So it's a little bit of a tighter schedule to get those articles out than a traditional Wednesday or Thursday article, which is again stretches me to like buckle down and get it done. And I thrive in that of like I need to get this done. Let me get it done. If you tell me I have to do a Wednesday, I'm not going to do it till Wednesday. So it's
That's
nice to be able to kind of push myself a little bit. But yeah, Fantrax has been great. We got some great content. You're coming out all the time, and Nick's to do a great job running that team. So yeah, you can check them out. They'll be on Fantrax HQ, or I'll try to tweet them out every week as well.
That's amazing. Dustin, I really don't want to end this episode with you, but I have one question that I always
Okay.
ask my guest at the end of my episode. So, if I want to ask you, what can you share with me something that you never shared before? A secret,
Hmm.
maybe, or I don't know, some story, a story maybe that you never shared ever from maybe ages before and you never spoke about it and you want to share it today in the Game
I'll
Changers.
I'll share a story that some people know, but not many people know. Whenever I travel, I have one tradition wherever I go that I do, and that is I stop at a Long John Silver's. We don't have one in Wisconsin. I love Long John Silver's, and I love the chicken from Long John Silver's, not the fish. So there's a guy, JC, who's a radio host in Arkansas, who I met at the combine, and now we kind of hang out at the combine and drafts together. And so he always gives me crap about getting chicken from Long John Silver's. So he actually sent me a text this morning that he saw a Facebook post of like, we don't deserve the chicken from Long John Silver. So if you're ever traveling with me and I ever just disappear for a half an hour, like if we're at the combine or we're at the expo or anywhere and I just disappear for half an hour, probably because I went to go get Long John Silver's. So no matter when I'm traveling, I know where they are on my route, like through Chicago. I stop. Like I know this is the last one before I get home. I gotta stop, get some chicken, get some hush puppies. So no matter where I go, for traveling with the family, my wife knows she's got to look up where the nearest Long John Silver's is. So most people don't know that, but I love the chicken from Long John Silver's. So Long John Silver's, if you're listening, send me some chicken, or get one here in
Yeah.
Wisconsin. But yeah, there's a lot of times I'll go to an event and I'll just dip out for half an hour to go to Long John Silver's to get some chicken.
Oh my
No,
God,
it wasn't the
sniper
chicken we
now.
had the night at the expo. The night at the expo, that was Sheets' chicken. But there was a half an hour at the expo. I just dipped out and went to Long John Silver's and ate Long John Silver's in my car and came back.
So Doug and I, whenever we drive to Ohio, we stop at Snappy's.
It's just I'm already planning. Like I'm going to Michigan this weekend. I'm going to Michigan this weekend. I know where I'm going to stop. There's a Long John Silver. I should get there right around lunchtime. I will stop there and have my Long John Silvers. I literally went to the combine this past year and was like, "Hey, I'll meet you guys over at the stadium." And I drove to Long John Silver's. They opened at 11. I was there at like 10:55, and they're like, "We're not open yet." I was like, "I know, but when you do open, I need 3 pieces of chicken and 4 hush puppies."
Oh
And they're like,
my
"Okay, it'll be
God.
15 minutes." I was like, "No problem. I'll wait in my car." And I got it, just ate in my car, and then went back to the thing.
I love it, Dustin. I love it. I love that story. Every single one have a story.
Yep,
Look at that.
yep.
Snappies.
Snappies.
Yes. So before I conclude, Dustin, could you please let our audience know how they can connect with you and where to find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the D Unit 13. So THEDUNIT 13. It's the best place to find or connect me. My DMs are always open. Bridge the Gap podcast is every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. You can search for Bridge the Gap Pod. No spaces in there. That's the best way to find it. Or you can just find me, find it on my Twitter. It has a link there. Every Tuesday from 10 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Eastern, or 9 to 10 Central, which is where I'm at. Live show. We talk about things. Comments are open. We love for people to drop in, drop your comments. Yes, we are talking about a specific topic, but if you come in with a sit star question, we'll gladly answer that. We just want to build a community. We want to build a third place for you guys to come and talk football in general. And hopefully we can have a conversation and continue it once the show's over. But thank you for having me on. This was a blast. I had a great time. Thanks for reaching out and inviting me on. It's an honor to be on episode 50 of Game Changers. You guys are doing some great stuff at the Sports Affiliation, so happy to be part of it.
The honor is mine, Dustin. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Game Changers. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dustin Ludke and gained valuable insights into his world and the world of fantasy football. Thank you, Dustin, for sharing your experiences, life lessons, and wisdom with us. We appreciate you. Join us for the next episode of The Game Changers on Wednesday, October 2nd, when I welcome Jameson Hutchinson as my special guest. I also want to express my gratitude again to Iggy, Evan, JC, and the whole TSA team for their continued support, for providing me with this exceptional platform, sharing my guests' authentic stories and experiences. A special acknowledgement goes to JC for his invaluable contribution behind the scene. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more viewers like you. Follow us on social media and stay updated on upcoming episodes and join our community, the Sports Affiliation, where everyone is welcome. Until next time, keep challenging the game and making your mark. This is Carla signing off with Dustin. Have a great evening. Bye.